Hello, I'm Dr. Jianing Chen from BNU HKBU UIC. Welcome back to the course of Studies of Contemporary Chinese Linguistics. This is Chapter 5, Syntax. Okay, here is the outline of this chapter. In this chapter, I'm going to introduce the grammar, syntax, and morphology with their relationship among each other. And I will talk about linguistic type and other aspects of the syntax of contemporary Chinese linguistics, including subject, possessive, classifiers, demonstratives, plurals, duplication, pronouns, negation, questions, imperatives, adjectives, adverbs, adpositions, and so on. Okay, before the major discussion, let's first clarify the parts of speech in modern Chinese. Here is a chart listing the classification of parts of speech, the word class in Chinese, with their English translation. We will use such terms. We'll mention them later in the further discussion. Okay, what is grammar? Remember, the topic of this chapter is syntax. What's the relationship between grammar and syntax? So grammar can be understood in different aspects, in different fields actually. Grammar can be related to a natural language. That means the set of structural constraints on speakers or writers' composition of clause, phrases, and words. This is something about a natural language, an ethnic language, a language used by a group of human beings. Besides, we can also discuss the grammar of an artificial language. For example, computer language also has grammar. Now, in this chapter, we're going to talk about the natural language's grammar. And grammar can also refer to the study of such constraints, including domains such as phonology, morphology, and syntax, and often comprehended by phonetics, semantics, and programmatics. In this way, grammar is a very broad term, can relate to many subfields of linguistics, but morphology and syntax might be the core parts. Okay, there are two different approaches to study grammar: traditional grammar and theoretical grammar. Traditional grammar is more related to particular natural language, and theoretical grammar is something abstract, more related to the philosophical analysis of a human language. Okay, we can also classify the grammar study into description and prescription. Descriptive grammar refers to a fully explicit grammar, which describes the grammatical constructions of a particular language. So depict the real situation of a structure of a language. Sometimes we use the term reference grammar, which refers to a reference book describing the grammar of a language. We usually make use of the reference grammar to learn another language. And besides, we still have prescriptive grammar, which refers to the establishment of rules defining preferred use of language. That means it's required how to speak or how to use a language properly. The difference between them is descriptive and prescriptive. So for prescriptive grammar, the rules may address such linguistic aspects of spelling, pronunciation, vocabulary, syntax, and semantics. In this way, prescriptive grammar also includes a lot of aspects of linguistics. Last time, we distinguished a little bit between syntax and morphology. Here we can discuss it further. Syntax is a linguistic structure about the word level. That means it studies how sentences are formed. While morphology studies the structure at or below the word level. How the words are formed, but above the level of individual sounds. The study of individual sounds belongs to the phonology. However, there's actually no clear line can be drawn between syntax and morphology. They are they are interplayed with each other. We need to understand the language by both aspects simultaneously. While the importance of morphology and syntax for different languages are not the same. For example, for syntactic and analytic language, focus can be different on different aspects. For syntactic language, word order is not significant, but morphology is. A very typical example is Latin language. Latin uses affixes and inflections to convey same information that Chinese does in syntax, which means Chinese focuses more on syntax. While analytic language, morphology is not significant, but syntax is. As I mentioned, Chinese is a good example. In Chinese, the meaning is very context dependent. But the word itself, individual words, do not show much information. Okay, let's discuss the definition of syntax. Syntax refers to the study of how words and morphemes combine to form larger units, such as phrases and sentences. It studies word order, grammatical relations, hierarchical sentence structure, agreement, and nature of cross-linguistic variations, and so on. And there are numerous approaches to syntax that differ in their central assumption and goals. That means different scholars could hold different opinion toward different language study of their syntax. Even the same language can be analyzed in different ways using syntactic methods. You can compare that situation with that phonology, while has not so many approaches. What kind of language do you study? Scholars use similar ways to study their phonology. Okay, here's a very important question. What is the sequence of Chinese language element? For example, if you divide elements into subject, verb, and object, which is the very basic element of any units in grammatical units in human language. So what about the sequence? In Chinese, the sequence, typical sequence is a subject, verb, and object. This is not the most frequent language in the world. Actually, there are 45% of human language put the sequence of SOV, while Chinese belongs to the SVO category, similar to English, French, Russian, Spanish, and some other major languages in this world. Typical SOV language includes Japanese, Korean, and so on, while Arabic belongs to the VSO, typical VSO language. Okay, So as a SVO language, you can compare that with English. The basic structure of them are very similar. That means the subject precedes the verb, while the transitive verbs precede their objects. In this case, this is the same with English. In Chinese, we say 他喝茶. In English, he drinks tea. But sometimes, especially in casual expression, Chinese speakers use inverted sentence. Look at this example. 吃一碗吧, 你 put the subject behind. Well, generally speaking, the sequence of subject or the situation of subject in Chinese is not very restrict. In Chinese, sometimes there is a topic prominent. That means the sentence can begin with a topic, usually a given or old information that mentioned before, and end with the comments or new information. Look at this sentence. 我进了屋，屋子里有张桌子，桌子上有个苹果，被人咬了一口。Here's a series of sentences, subsentence, or clause, right? So the first information provided here is 我进了屋. And in this sentence, 屋, the room, is mentioned. And then the room here, 屋子, became the subject of the next clause. 屋子里有张桌子，桌子上有个苹果. Okay, then, so the 屋子 or 桌子, actually they are position, their place. They are not the agent, not the actor of an action. They are only place, but in Chinese it's natural and acceptable as them as the subject of a clause. A direct or indirect object may be moved to the start of a clause to create topicalization. This phenomenon is called topicalization. And it is possible for an object to move to the position in front of a verb for emphasis. For example, 药他已经吃了. Okay, it is actually he has the medicine, but medicine here can be used as the subject of the sentence because it was put ahead. 药他已经吃了. And 他已经吃了 is the comments of the 药 toward the 药. Oh, this is what I mentioned, location subject. A location can be used as subject. The parent subject of the verb can move to object position, behind. An empty subject position is then often occupied by an expression of location. And sometimes the verb 有 or others generally denote position can be appearance or disappearance. For example, 院子里有辆车. 有辆车. They're similar to the there be frame. Or 停着辆车. Okay, 院子里 here is a location, can be used here as a subject. It is very unique comparing with English to make a location as a subject. You can compare the English version of this meaning. In a country yard, it's parked a vehicle. You need to use the preposition phrase, in the country yard. And other situation includes a noun subject or per job. That means the subject can be omitted from a clause if it can be inferred from the context. It is quite often happened in Chinese language. For example, 今天爬山，明天露营. We don't know who take this action. And but here in the context of Chinese listener can understand it. Since the listener can understand it according to the context, it's not necessary to mention it in the original sentence. It can be accepted to say 今天爬山，明天露营. And the subject of the verb hide and camp is left to be inferred. Another feature of Chinese language is the final. It is a final language, means the modifier precedes the noun. We talked about this example last time, right? 红花. Okay, 红 is the modifier and precede the noun 花. In the noun phrase, the high noun comes last with modifier in front, and all modifiers, including the relative clauses, come in front of it. This includes attributive adjectives like a big or red, determiners, this or that, and qualifiers or classifiers, possessives, and relative clauses. Look at this whole phrase as the example. 他的上次和我一起买的那条大红围巾. Okay, there are multiple modifiers before they had noun. 围巾. 他上次和我一起买的那条大红. Okay, all these modifiers comes before they had noun. And of the situation of relative clause, that it must be precede a noun, which is different from English expression. Like possessions, possessives, and some adjectives marked with a luxury final particle de. De is very useful. Okay, here's de is a luxury final particle. Okay, to be added to other words. For example, a free relative clause is in the form of a modified noun. 买的 refers to the thing that we bought or anybody bought. 买的东西, but 东西 here or anything here can be omitted. And it also comes after or before, depends on which part you want to emphasize, the determiner phrase. Compare this to pair of examples. 两个我教过的学生, 两位我教过的学生, or 我教过的那两位学生. 我教过的两位学生 means 那两位, that. Okay, that determined those students that I have taught. The sequences are different and depends on which part you want to emphasize. Usually emphasize the first part. Okay, there's no relative pronouns in Chinese in the relative clause, which is different from English. For example, there's no such part of a that, which, or who. In the example of the farmer who grows fruits, in Chinese we say 种水果的农民. No part is a counterpart to who here. Okay, 种水果的 used as a modifier, using the final particle de to link them with the head noun. Okay, about possessive. It's also another important problem need to discuss. Possessive are formed by adding de. Okay, de can be multiple functional. Here, de can be used its way to make a possessive. 所有格. Okay, in noun phrase, for example, 学校的, or used following a pronoun, 他的, means the possession. De may be omitted in phrase denoting inalienable possession. Inalienable possession means it belongs to one only. For example, 我的妈妈. 我的妈妈 only belongs to me, or I am the son or daughter of her. So 我的妈妈, such de can be omitted. Similar to my mom, 我妈妈. Okay, 我妈妈. Compare that with the relative clause 我教过的 and adjective modification 红的. We mentioned those different usage of de earlier, right? Okay, you can compare them. The form of them are the same. They all use the, but the function of them or the meaning of them are different. Okay, another feature is that there's no article. This is very important. There's no article in Chinese. No and the such things. A similar counterpart of an article probably is literally means one. Okay, so that means a noun without article, a noun can stand alone, right? So the word one followed by a appropriate classifier. Classifier, on the other hand, is very important. It may be used in some cases where English would have or an. Okay, look at this examples. 我看见桌子上有一个苹果，有一个苹果 here. E is a numeral and 个 is a classifier, right? But numeral E here can be omitted sometimes. 我看见桌子上有个苹果 okay, acceptable. 有个苹果 okay, 我把苹果吃了 here. If you again mention or refers to that apple in English, you need to use the apple, okay, the apple, right? So, but there is no the here in Chinese. 我把苹果吃了 okay. According to context, Chinese listener understand this sentence according to the context. Here, in the second sentence, you mention 我把苹果吃了. That means you refers to that apple that you mentioned earlier. Okay, so as I said, classifier or quantifier or mirror words, they mean similarly, and they're very important in Chinese language. And the purpose of them is in order to be counted. So you need to use such words before noun in order to count them. Okay, so when specifying an amount of a countable noun, a classifier must be inserted which agree with the noun. So it's agreement between the noun and the classifier. You cannot use them randomly. The particular classifier matched particular noun. 两头牛，一瓶水, for example, you can normally you're not supposed to use other classifiers. 两只牛，两条牛 sounds strange. 两头牛, okay. And compare those nouns used as similar of a classifier in English to bottles of wine, because the wine is uncountable, or to 3 sheets of paper, because paper is uncountable. So uncountable nouns here in English must be used as in such, but countable nouns in English do not necessarily use such qualifiers. Only the number, numeral, and the noun in English, but number, noun, and the classifier in between in Chinese. And this is not a unique phenomena in Chinese, but it's very common in East Asian languages. And certain nouns representing units of measurement, time, currency are themselves classifiers, so you do not need to use more. For example, 1小时, 1小时, 小时 is a classifier itself. Okay. It's not necessary to say 1个小时, but sometimes we say 1个钟头 in Mandarin. Okay. 10元, okay, $10 or 10 yuans. Okay, the classifiers are associated with nouns, as I mentioned, and they are generally associated with certain groups of nouns related by means. So you can figure out the meaning, the original meaning of those classifiers. For example, 条 means something long and something thin, narrow. Okay, so you used 一条绳, 一条蛇, 一条鱼. The shape of such things are similar as long. And 把 can be used to something or some objects with handles. 一把刀, you have a handle on your knife. 一把伞, umbrella or knife or ruler. 一把尺. Okay, 张 means flat. sheet-like objects that can be used with a 一张纸, 一张照片, 一张羊皮, and so on. So there are dozens of classifiers. This is pretty difficult to learn, to study as a foreign language speaker. You need to memorize them individually, okay? And but there's a simple one. There's a general classifier, 个. In most cases, can be used in many different situations. 一个人, 一个桌子 sometimes can be acceptable, okay? Even though it sounds strange. Okay, so let's talk about demonstratives. This or that, 这, 那, okay? And they are similar to the English words this and that. And when used before a noun, they often followed by proper classifiers. So that means the classifier, but sometimes can be omitted. For example, 这件衣服不好看. It is a typical expression. 这件衣服不好看. Okay. Sometimes you can say 这衣服不好看. Okay. And when a noun is preceded by a numeral, the use of the classifier is in most cases mandatory. So that means a number plus a classifier. This is a typical way. Okay. 我想要一条裙子. 我想要条裙子. Okay, also acceptable if the number is 1. 我想要一裙子. Usually we don't say such way.